Locq, we are ready to continue in section 46 on prayer. We're going to be handling 3 questions only on account of there's a break into the next section, which I would like to try to just start considering all together in its start. So we're going to start with question 297. And I have got some possible questions to share. Did anybody look at any questions ahead and say, oh, that's interesting to me. I think I'd like to share something about this one. Anybody have anything like that? You don't remember? Okay. Okay. So I thought I would recommend these to start. I thought, Brother Tone, when we get to question number 302, and you can check with me later on also, I have a note written down here. 302, what ultimately influences our values, is a nice question. For the Joe Donut, I thought question 303, you might enjoy commenting on. Okay. 303. Miss Kathy, question 304, how should our priorities be set? Question 304. And then I got as far as question 305, and I thought that'll be in the next section, the next part, on judging. How shall we judge? Miss Nora, that would be question 305. 305. And I thought you might enjoy that a little bit when we get to it. We'll get started on question, we'll no doubt get started on question 300 on Thursday. So it'll take just a little bit to get there. Okay, and others, if you see a question, you say, oh, I have a particular thought about this. You can let me know ahead of time so you can maybe handle it more completely. But anybody at any time, as you're studying ahead and you have an insight that comes to you, write it down, underline it so you can remind yourself that you want to share something special from there, and that would be good to do. Okay, so we're at question number 297 as we finish up the section on prayer. Question 297 is based on Matthew 6:13, which says, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. And the first half we covered in the last question, 296. So 297 says, what should all the circumstances God takes us through lead to? And people got A, yes, a thorough understanding of God's glory. A thorough understanding of God's glory. Now, later on in the book of Luke, when they have the Lord's Prayer, quote unquote, that is not included. That last ending is not included there. That's because it's a different setting where Jesus is teaching about prayer, and so it is different there, slightly different. Okay, so let's look at B first of all. Okay, what should all the circumstances lead us to? Okay, well, not a happy life necessarily. A happy life is far too weak an aspiration. It is an aspiration. I'd like to be happy. Anybody else? Everyone wants to be happy, but your thinking is too small if you do that. And not only that, but it is too fragile and really not able to be guaranteed. Reading the book of Ecclesiastes about the vanity of all that is done under the sun, that should put any hope of ultimate happiness on earth into perspective. Yeah, Brother Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things about that because happiness is so fickle.
Yes.
Because it's based on the same word as happenings, and happiness, as we would see it, is only based on our circumstances. And happiness can change. That doesn't, but the word I like to contrast with happiness or look, maybe put alongside of it is joy. The only person who can rob you of your joy is yourself.
Yes.
Because if we're doing what God wants us to do, then we will be joyful. We might not be happy,
Yeah.
But we will be joyful because we know that because, God ultimately is in full control, and even when we're not going through great circumstances, if we're still focusing on Him, we can still have that joy even through the difficult and even the not so happy circumstances. And one other point that I wanted to make was there's an apologist, a well-known apologist by the name of Frank Turek. Do you know the name?
Yeah.
Okay. In any case, one of the ways that he challenges atheists in particular, and people who are not believers in general, but usually atheists in particular, is he says, well, if I could prove that Christianity is true, would you become a Christian? And a lot of times people say no.
Mm-hmm.
And so then his conclusion is, and I agree with him, his conclusion is they're not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest.
Right.
And fulfilling happiness quest, and that because supposedly atheists are atheists because they've thought through all these things and they're too rational to believe that there's a God. But he just puts it plainly: if I could prove that Christianity is true or the Bible is true, would you believe it? And if they say no, then that's really the only conclusion you can come to.
Yeah, probably a lot of people are afraid to deal with maybe somebody who's an atheist because they think they're going to come across some kind of great argumentation where the argumentation is totally irrelevant because of just what you said. It's argumentation is not what they're concerned about. And in fact, what we find is that people that purport to be so intellectual and rational are really pretty shallow. There's an awful lot of shallow thinking that's out there that does not take things into consideration. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember the name of that film that we watched.
Power of the Air?
No, this is going way back, about the teaching of evolution in school, and teachers or professors who didn't necessarily not believe evolution, but they didn't follow it lockstep, and they were banned. And I can't remember the name of the film.
It was with
Stein?
Yeah.
No, not that.
Stein.
No, not that
Ben
film.
Stein.
Ben Stein. Yeah, Ben Stein.
Ben Stein. He did that.
What was it called? I know. Well, you know which film I'm talking about.
We'll get that Googled.
Yeah, but in any case, he and also Ray Comfort have interviewed atheistic professors who teach an outright atheistic approach to evolution. I know that some people believe in theistic evolution. I don't think we can reconcile evolution with the Bible, but that's not the purpose of my point right now. The movie's Expelled. Just interviewing these professors, and you think, wow, they're going to have these amazing answers that are just going to knock your socks off. And they do knock your socks off, but only because their arguments are so bad. And that they just really don't have any substance behind them. And then really when you strip away all the jargon and you strip away all the pretenses and all the degrees, everything that they say is based on a belief and faith and nothing more than that. Because true science is observational, testable, and repeatable. And most of the things that they say are none of those things. So therefore, they don't even qualify as true science.
And their interpretation skills of other things, even philosophically. I remember I can't remember which one it was, one of the popular atheistic debaters. He was addressing a group of high school students, and as he got started, there were a number of students that protested. They just got up and quietly walked out because they weren't going to countenance his nonsense. And one of the issues that he was bringing up was, well, if the Bible could get everything so wrong about slavery of all things, then it could be wrong about other things. Only when you start to discover what slavery is, you start realizing that this is a way bigger subject. We only think in terms of slavery, of course, when it comes to something like the times of the Civil War. What people don't realize is that the peaceful Native Americans who were at one with nature, they had slaves themselves, and they would enslave each other. They had black slaves. There were black slaves blacks who actually had white slaves. That the Irish coming over, had a form of slavery, indentured servitude, and that slavery encompasses far more, and that even biblically speaking, of course, something like with slavery, you do not see, what you see is the employer-employee relationship described in the scriptures, because slavery back then was not the same thing as what Civil War era slavery was, and that if anything, Paul and others set the tone for bringing equality between master and slave, so that they were not treated, in the Christian community, they did not live as master and slave, they lived as brothers. Case in point, Philemon, the book of Philemon with Onesimus is of that sort. And so it's like they make these shallow statements that seem plausible at the outset until you start to actually think. And then it becomes extremely obvious. And and this goes, let me bring it back to the point here that as Joe introduced it, was that in examining these people, logic is not the thing. They're looking for happiness. They're looking to be undisturbed. They're looking to shove everybody off so they don't have to think any harder. And so they are looking for merely a happy life. And in fact, so much of society is pursuing happiness. Consider our whole entertainment industry, just so much the way it's emphasized, how the truly idols of Hollywood are lifted up as if people who pretend to be people, as I like to say, have a real opinion. Now, some will have a more qualified opinion than others, but again, you hear like this ton of nonsense that comes out of there. They don't really care. They're only looking at trying to have their own way and be self-centered, as I was saying this morning.
Yeah, anyway, from a logical perspective, appealing to anybody in Hollywood is an appeal to authority anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know why people are so caught up in, okay, well, this person is famous, so therefore whatever he or she says must be really significant, you know, and just by virtue of that. Yeah. And that's just a horrible way to think. But the interesting thing is as I like to as I see it anyway, is that at least materialistic atheists are consistent, because logic would not be able to evolve in a purely materialistic atheistic worldview, and therefore they don't use any.
Yeah. Yeah, and also going back to the thing with Ecclesiastes, consider, check out the book of Ecclesiastes, read it over again, at least the first half of it, and then the last chapter the last couple of chapters especially good. But if you look at Solomon, remember that the premise that he lays out in the first several chapters is he tried this, he tried that, he tried entertainment, he tried wisdom, he tried building projects, he tried so many things and found it to be empty. And truly, anything you go to do, you get tired of after a little while. Consider binge watching television. You can only take so much time in front of a television screen, even if you got something that's worth watching at all. So happiness, far too weak a thing that the sufferings of this life would lead us to. It's interesting, yeah, we want to be happy, but if that's what people are doing, they're really shortchanging themselves of reaching out and touching God's glory. Look at C now, though. C, what should all the circumstances God takes us through lead to? Salvation through suffering? This is a reference to a doctrine that's especially in the Catholic Church, and it could be elsewhere. There are those who believe that those who go through the ultimate suffering of martyrdom are saved because of the suffering. According to, if you go online and you search this out, I came up with one quote. It says, according to Christian doctrine, they mean Catholic, okay? Martyrdom renders the soul of the martyr worthy of immediate entrance into heaven. The church prays to the martyrs, but has never prayed for the martyrs. Well, I'll tell you what, if somebody's in the position where they're going into martyrdom, you better be praying for them. And then afterwards, do not pray to them. It's just supposed to be to the reverse. Nancy, go ahead. I'll just share for a little bit there.
Yeah, years ago, they also put a premium on suffering while you were living. And I had relatives that would regularly go to Canada to see the great Our Lady of de Beaupré, and they would go up the steps on their knees, and if you could put uncooked rice on the steps so you would suffer as you prayed, all the better, because somehow this found even more favor with God. And I used to be interested in the lives of the saints when I was a kid, so I would just go to our school library and take out one after another. And these children that were supposed to have seen an appearance of Mary only got to that point because while they prayed, they had very rough ropes tied around their waists so that they should hurt while they were praying. There was just something about self-denial, which is a good thing, and carried to some extreme where you're inflicting pain on yourself. And they've distorted good doctrine of telling the flesh no to make the flesh bleed and hurt and suffer, and somehow this finds favor with God. And it's so sad how many people buy into this. I don't know if this is still done, but years ago in certain countries, I know in Italy and some Spanish countries and also in the Philippines, they would have actual crucifixions of people as they observed Easter. And I mean, to the point where they're bleeding. And I don't know how far they carried that, but they were really into bloodshed to please God. And it's just so sad. And I don't know how much that appeals to this generation of self-indulgence. But it's definitely still part of Catholic dogma.
Yeah. And really, the Catholic Church is quite conflicted about it because the literature out there is also, I guess they realized what they had created at some point, and so it's taught that you are not supposed to seek martyrdom. You don't put yourself out there in order to try to be martyred, but it's something that's got to be brought on you from without. And yet, at the same time, in their conflicted nature, this whole idea of suffering. Now, stop and think. When you have people who are trying to bring suffering on themselves, think of the satanic nature of that. That's what demonism is all about. I remember reading for Martin Luther before he got his breakthrough and realized that salvation is by grace alone. Is one who would beat himself and do things in order to try to purge himself and purify himself. So it's really conflicted in the Catholic Church of trying to avoid martyrdom while hoping you get to be martyred so you can get immediate access, which is nowhere in the Bible, and yet you're not supposed to see that, yet you're supposed to be causing yourself suffering. It is very much conflict and is satanic at the same time. Somebody else in there. Brother Joe, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also in Islam, it's taught that really the only way you could ever know for sure that you're going to be in the presence of, well, not in the presence of God, let's say, but to arrive to, I believe they call heaven Jannah, is through martyrdom in the cause of Allah.
Yes.
It would be the ultimate form of, the ultimate extreme of jihad.
Yeah.
And so that's just a big contradiction because, well, not a big contradiction, but a big contrast because, so therefore in Islam, you're taught to die for God, but in Christianity, God died for us.
Yeah, and we live for God.
And we live for God, right.
Yeah. Making some notes. It reminds me of an old military thing where the sergeant said, would you die for your country? No, you should live for your country. You make the enemy die for his.
Yeah, as I heard somebody on TV that said the difference between Christianity and Islam is that Christians say convert and live. The Muslims would say convert or die. So it's a opposite.
I'm going to make, these are going to go into the notes. Yeah, you have to ask yourself, would you rather have your neighbor be a good Christian or a good Muslim? If you took Islam seriously, you would go out and kill the infidels. But if you have someone who takes their Christianity seriously, he's going to go out and try to help you to live and find eternal life. Okay. Let's look then at a thorough understanding of God's glory, the ultimate fruit of the effect on our lives. If our prayers are answered according to this pattern, is the glory of God. After all these things, you're going to be able to really understand God and see Him more thoroughly and understand His will more completely. I mean, if I'm going to have to do that suffering, I want it to be for a reason, I always say. I don't want to suffer for nothing. Okay, question 298 is based on Matthew 6, 14 to 15. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Now, this form of argument appears in probably several ways in the New Testament, but it's all about why can we not find forgiveness by not forgiving others' trespasses. If we don't forgive others' trespasses, why would we not find forgiveness? The answer is C. If we do not understand the nature of grace, then we cannot ask it in the time of forgiveness from God. Look at A. God will get even with us for not being nice to others. Okay, God is not vindictive. Okay, God is not vindictive. B. There's nothing. Okay, we have to make peace with the enemies so we can deserve to be forgiven. Well, there's nothing we could ever do to have us deserve to be forgiven. If we merit righteousness, then we do not need forgiveness. Okay, but let's look at the answer C then. This emphasis on forgiving others goes to the issue of why only those who are saved could pray this prayer. If we cannot forgive others because we think there is nothing that could be done to make up for their offense, then that demonstrates we don't even know what forgiveness is. It means you don't understand grace then. Because if Greg, if you do something and I say, well, I can never forgive you, okay, that means I have no idea what grace is. But don't test me now. Something that is, forgiveness is something that is done in the Spirit. Instead, if you do not know what forgiveness is, then how can you ask for it from God if you don't have a definition? Well, this is one of the problems I find with so much misunderstanding in all areas of life and all kinds of social areas of life is people are talking two different languages. Okay, do you know what the difference between a riot and a riot is? Okay, depends on who's doing the rioting. One is an insurrection, the other is mostly peaceful, right? Okay, people are using two different kinds of definitions for things. So it's like, well, the one is to be encouraged, the other one is to be causing you to be canceled from society and banished from the earth. Okay, so people have a different understanding. So if you say forgive, and what you mean is overlook my sin and let me continue in it, you got the wrong definition of forgiveness. If your definition of forgive is pay until you've paid the last farthing, you've got the wrong definition of forgiveness. Okay, forgive means to pay the debt yourself to yourself. That's exactly what God did. Now, somebody would say to let the sin debt go, but no, it's not. We do not, well, first of all, God does not let the sin debt go. He pays it to himself. He paid the price himself for our debt to him. And so what happens is, if I have somebody who does something to me, I am absorbing the cost, and in effect, I am paying I'm paying the debt to myself rather than claiming it from you. So it's not just overlooking; it is I am absorbing the payment for your sins. So so if you can't forgive others, and you go to God and you say, "Well, God, forgive me," you might as well be speaking in some made-up language, because it certainly is made up. You made it up. You made your own definition up, and it's not God's definition. And this happens there's a number of scriptures that are like this. So this then is the underlying power in the whole prayer. As a forgiven one, you are then able to enter into the Lord's model prayer. And that's one of the reasons I believe why Jesus emphasized this at the end. It's kind of like he starts off with "Our Father, which art in heaven," and he ends up with the basis for being able to call God Father, which is, "I am forgiven." Make sure that I understand what forgiveness is. Then this underscores the whole rest of the model prayer. Any other things somebody would want to share? Miss Nancy, yes. Microphone for Miss Nancy. Sorry.
It reminded me of when Christ was talking in, I think it's, yes, Luke 7:40. There was a certain creditor which had two debtors. The one owed 500 pence and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said, Thou hast rightly judged. And then he goes on to describe what they all did not do for him when he came into the room. But the woman washed his feet with her tears and kissed him and anointed his head. And he then says, Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. And it seems to correspond with your understanding increases as you know the experience and then can give it out.
Yeah, I'd say this would be corollary to that, an extension of it. You know, if you understand forgiveness, because you can forgive others, when you understand forgiveness, you'll understand your relationship to God, and you will have that greater love that it would follow then. Yeah. With Joe.
Yeah, one of the things I like to, I guess, meditate upon is right now there are about 7.5 billion people in the world. And let's just say 5 billion of those people are at the age, let's say at the age of accountability. So I'm just making numbers up. I really don't know. Yeah. Now, if each of us did well and only sinned once a day, that's 5 billion times 365. And that's only 1 year. And God has to put up with this. And I know for myself that if I only sin once in a day, that was a pretty good day. I mean, you know, and to think that we can't forgive somebody of one thing they did against us when the God who died for us has to put up with this on a daily basis and doesn't even have most of us confessing our sin to him because most people are not believers. So can you imagine all that unconfessed sin that God has to deal with on a daily basis? It makes me wonder, how in the world does God put up with us? And yet, he still does.
Yeah, it sort of goes to the point of, are we more righteous than God? Right. Okay, are we more holy than him that we can have a harsher standard that we don't forgive? No. Yeah, how dare we? Okay. Question 299. When adding fasting to our prayers, what should we be sure to focus on? Based on Matthew 6:16 to 18. Moreover, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, But unto thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. So when adding fasting to our prayers, what should we be sure to focus on? Okay, it is B, the spiritual effect, not the outward appearance of fasting. Let's look at C first. Okay, fasting, okay, the healthful and energizing purging of toxins from our system. Okay, fasting might be something that people have come to do today for some health benefit, but that is not the spiritual purpose behind fasting. Remember when we were looking at the Beatitudes that fasting is associated with mourning over sin in the Scriptures. When we looked at blessed are they that mourn, and we look at the times of fasting in the Old Testament, when it's mentioned, there were people that were mourning over sin. If you want to say, well, fasting, some people have a more advanced understanding of fasting, that it makes you more spiritually conscious, and certainly if we were more spiritually conscious, we would probably be more in touch with our sinfulness also. So it is not just for healthful and energizing purging of toxins from our system. A and B, let's look at it together. Okay, how we encourage others to piety by our sad and suffering appearance, or by appearing before God. Looking like you are fasting for the purpose of impressing men will get you what men can provide. Okay, people are more encouraged by the strength that God gives us in the time of trial than the strength that we can muster as we are going through trials. So people have a chance, as they see the strength, not the weakness, as they see the true strength of standing up under times of temptation is going to have more bearing. So fasting and going through the suffering before God will get you what God can provide. Fasting before men will get you what men can provide. Okay, let me see. Alex, do you want to make sure the microphones are unmuted for home there? And let me ask if there's anybody from home has some thoughts along the way. We can go back to our other questions again. Any comments or questions from home?
I have a question, Pastor, regarding forgiveness.
Yes.
Kind of the reverse of what Jesus says. What do we do if other people will not forgive us? If we have transgressed against them, they are not believers, they're not Christians, but they refuse to forgive us. Do we just forgive them for their unforgiveness?
Well, that would be standard. Okay, we would forgive them for their unforgiveness. I think you probably end up getting into a little bit of a different topic in that regard. How do we respond to those who are abusing us? I think it would probably fall in that category, and that would be, of course, that we should just be loving to them and try to win them over. Probably be worth exploring even more to think about that. But I think that would lie at the root of it, in all likelihood. But for sure, we should be forgiving of others. Now, whether they receive that forgiveness, well, number one, they don't sound like they're really talking to you anyhow to begin with. But in our hearts, we should do that. How it comes into actual, how it is realized, you might not get to see that. Miss Nancy.
I think it also might have to do with the level of unforgiveness shown. If they are vindictive and try to abuse you, or they, in some cases, try to even do you physical harm or threaten your life. I mean, we've had people do that to us over the course of the years we've been here, not just one time either. When it rises to that level, that then now you've got civic obligations, and you have to protect yourself legally and tell the police and things like that. But if it's like a family member, or if it's a coworker, and usually stuff like that against a believer, it might be an imagined offense. like was covered this morning in a sermon. Sometimes they just can't stand you being around because your presence is convicting to them.
Yeah.
But in cases like that, I think if we just keep showing the love of Christ, they might come around. I know that was the case with many of my lost relatives were very antagonistic and bitter toward my family when we became Christians. And over the years, they, modified that a little bit. Now they're actually loving. And there were several times where I prayed and prayed and thought, Lord, this is a bit much for me to take. I had one relative outright blaming me for my sister's death. She had advanced ovarian cancer that she fought for 5 years, yet somehow I was to blame that she died. And this relative brought this up on 4 different occasions in front of people, giving me a real dressing down for my I just handled everything wrong, and it was because of me that my sister died. And I was grieving the death of my sister, and she really let me have it. And I started to wonder, maybe I shouldn't even be around her at all. But I just kept praying about it, and I kept saying, okay, maybe one more time, and just show her the love of Christ, and just try to absorb this. And yesterday I was sorting through some Christmas cards and get well cards that were sent to me, and her cards showed so much love and concern, and obviously whatever she thought before, she's not thinking now. And sometimes if you can just consistently, with God's grace and by His power, forgive people and overlook the dumb things that they say, which they probably don't even mean in the moment.
There's an awful lot of stuff that's just dumb out there
Yeah.
and should just be, forget about it.
Yeah. I think what happened was I had another family member who was starting to lose it mentally and was passing information to this other relative that she believed. And she thought that my sister had no insurance, and she thought that we were just neglecting her, and that she could have been saved and all this. And if you step back and try to understand why somebody is so upset and see it from their view, sometimes that can help too. But if it rises to the level of an extremely abusive boss who's hurting you or hurting your reputation for a future job, I would, it could get to a point where it's time to change jobs.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's ever a time where a Christian should want to get even or like just stew over something to the point where now they're going to get back at somebody or do to them like was done to them. See, a lot of worldly people, like they'll say, treat people the way they treat you. But that's not what Jesus said. He said, treat people the way you would have them treat you. And it can be hard because we're also just humans, but we have the ability, by the power of Christ, to show them love and to forgive, no matter how badly they're behaving. And I've seen that. I've tapped into God's power when I had nothing left toward a coworker. She was just so out to get me. It was apparent to everybody. And I just kept doing good for her and blessing her. And it got to the point where she just broke down and cried. And she says, I've never met somebody with the ability to forgive as you have. And she was not a Christian, but she was starting to get it. She was trying to understand, and I said, this is God. This is what is in His Word, is how all people, that we're supposed to treat each other well, especially Christians, to other people. And she was so appreciative of things that I did for her, whereas once she would have not even accepted it. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but...
Yeah, in fact, it should be. I'm going to say this goes to the question of art versus science. We would like a logical rule, if this, then that. Some of it is, like we should forgive others. Bam, that's logical. You can apply that. Part of it is more art. Like, for instance, I'm going to forgive somebody, but do I have to stand there and take abuse? Do I have to present myself for abuse? And the answer is maybe. Okay. I remember somebody that Nancy worked for, and I encouraged her, far earlier than she left that particular position. I was like, this is definitely qualified. You shouldn't have to stay there. But she specifically, explicitly stayed there for testimony's sake, which did pan out to be a blessing after she actually did go to leave. But the question is, well, do I might have to take abuse, but do I have to keep taking it? If somebody comes up and borrows $100 from you and then goes and uses it for drugs and says, I can't pay you back, and then he comes up 10 more times to borrow $100 from you, are you obliged to submit yourself to stupidity and abuse? No. On the other hand, now in that description that I gave it, I would say just no. That's just the wisdom of it, the art of it is that, I think I can pretty much figure out this is not going to work. But we find this often in the case of an abusive spouse. And it can, by the way, it can go either which way. Although it's far more that men are abusing women, it's also done in the reverse. I recommend. I can't think of a time when I wouldn't recommend that a wife stay in an abusive situation. Okay, now we're going to be against divorce, and there's a long road to hoe to maybe deal with that, but you don't have to stay there and get beaten either, and that's something to consider. So it's again, we've heard some miraculous stories as people have hung in there and they've suffered the abuse, and on the other hand, I think it would be stupid to stay and suffer the abuse. It's art versus science. Definitely the science, you can apply the science, the rule, forgive, but not necessarily present yourself for continued abuse. Does that go along pretty much with what you're saying too? Okay. Somebody else. Is that good? Is that good for you, Donna?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very, very important. This is a common thing. You'll experience this all through life. What do I do next? Okay. Somebody else from something else from the lesson that was raised in your mind as you were going through. Any questions? Okay, very good. Then we're ready to go into the next part of section 46, which is putting God first. This is a great topic that's going to come up. Greg, we finished off the prayer part, so I'll just go ahead and be taking back over. But if you'd like to take something again, let me know. We'll put you up there. Okay. Yeah, he's going to be in and out and all over the place, catching the bad guys on the water. Okay, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Brother Joe Donovan, can I have you lead us in a closing word of prayer, please?